Alrighty, everyone, good afternoon. So, if you have just finished playing Kahoot, then kudos to you. And if you paid attention to how many that you got correct and how many that you missed, that's okay too. It's not about the points that you get, it's not about who's the quickest when they find the answer. It's about how we are applying the knowledge and letting us know if we have clarity and understanding. If you were not able to join Kahoot tonight, this video is definitely going to be for you because we really went over some great questions for us to, to take a dive into. And I get it. Some of them are kind of like mind-boggling, but that's okay because the exam is going to do just that to you. So let's take a dive into looking at some of these questions. Don't be scared. We're going to walk through them together. And I got these questions from Quizlet. Some of them came from Google Gemini, ChatGPT, just by me just putting some questions in there and it, formulating it for me. So we have a couple in their 40s are self-referred and want to work on their marriage. The wife tells you that they have been married 25 years and that things are just not the same anymore. The husband tells you that they hardly talk to each other and he misses the good relationship that they once had. As a strategic therapist, what interventions would you use with this couple in the middle stage of therapy? Now, if we go back and we look at this question, we've got some good information that's going on here, right? But does any of that information apply to some of these answer responses? Not really, because truth be told, this question has some fluff in it. I'm just going to be honest with you. It doesn't matter if they're in their 40s. It doesn't matter how long they've been married. They're just simply asking, what interventions are you going to use in the middle phase of therapy? And that is what you need to be looking for. Now, flat off the back, there are two answer responses that we can strike out. Any answer response that has to do with the genogram, get rid of it. Don't go back to it. You know that strategic therapists do not use genograms. Do not go back trying to make it make sense because you know that it doesn't. That leaves us with A and C. If we take a look at A, give directives. So we got one thing that a strategic therapist does in that answer response, right? Explore the role that the past family relationships are playing in the present. That should stop you and be like, that don't sound nothing like strategic, but that does sound like what? One of those transgenerational models, right? How that past relationship is impacting them in the present. Get rid of A and look at C. Directives, restraining, positioning, model, educate, communication skills. That is your best answer. That is how you navigate these questions on that MFT exam. Once you strike it out, do not go back. Don't do that to yourself. It only makes it harder to move on to the next question. Now, a 28-year-old man self-refers for therapy after his girlfriend ended their long-term relationship. During the intake, he reports feeling empty and hopeless and says, "Sometimes I think I wouldn't matter if I didn't wake up tomorrow." He denies having specific plans, but admits to occasional suicidal thoughts. After establishing safety and ensuring he has support and no immediate risk, therapy has continued for several sessions. By the middle stage of treatment, he reports still feeling worthless and stuck, saying, "Nothing I do make a difference." As a strategic therapist, what interventions would you most likely use with this client in the middle stage of therapy? Here we go again. Once you see those answer responses that has nothing to do with strategic therapy, strike it out and get rid of it. Again, if you look at this question, who cares that he just broke up with his girl? I won't say that because, it can be kind of sad when someone breaks up with their girlfriend. But he's feeling hopeless and he says he doesn't have a specific plan, knowing that we do need to still turn on our safety lens when it comes to us finding this answer. At the same exact time, we are thinking strategically. Okay? A says, continue to explore the client's past trauma. Now, first of all, no. Okay? No, absolutely not. Then it says to reframe and normalize suicidal thoughts. Do not ever pick an answer that has you normalizing suicidal thoughts. It is not normal to have suicide thoughts. It should not be treated as such. Get rid of A. Do not go back to it. And then it says encourage emotional expression. No, we just talked about this. Strategic therapist does not care about your emotions, okay? B says create a genogram. Right there, that should already tell you, strike it out. Strategic therapists do not do genograms. Family of origin influence, focus on insight. No, that's your transgenerational model, right? D says utilize free association, interpret resistance, and focus on unconscious motive. We also just talked about this. Strategic therapists don't care about free association, unconscious, subconscious, the conscious, whatever the case may be. They don't care about that. D is incorrect, making C your best answer. Assign paradoxical directive. Use the reframing to alter the client's perception about the hopelessness, engagement in small, meaningful tasks. That is your best answer for strategic therapy. We are thinking strategic, okay? A 19-year-old college student is referred by his RA after expressing suicidal thoughts to a roommate. In the initial session, he tells you, I don't even see the point of being here, and says he's overwhelmed by academic pressure, loneliness, and disappointing his parents. He admits to having had suicidal thoughts but denies any current plan or intent. He appears withdrawn and skeptical about therapy. As a strategic therapist, what would be the appropriate intervention during the initial phase of therapy with this client? Now, this is a question that is asking you, what would a strategic therapist do in the initial phase? But at the same time that we are thinking strategic, we got to turn on our safety lens and think safety first. Okay? And again, we're treating these answer responses just like those others. If it don't sound right, it ain't right. Okay? A says conduct a lethality assessment, establish a safety plan, provide clear directives to begin disrupting patterns of hopelessness. Okay. Now, let's look at the rest of them. B says assign a paradoxical intervention. I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to tell you why B is wrong flat out the back. Because this is a initial phase of therapy. And when do we do paradoxical interventions? In the middle phase of therapy, automatically making B wrong, strike it out, and don't go back. And then it talks about encourages the client to amplify feelings of despair in order to explore secondary gains. Okay, now we're just going all the way off to a more emotional response, and strategic therapists don't do that. C says use reframing. I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to tell you this. We do not reframe. We don't normalize any of that when it comes to suicidal ideation. Yes, a reframe is used in the initial phase, but we cannot reframe suicidal ideation. And what do we do when we have a question about suicidal ideation? D is the same thing. Normalize the client's feeling. We're not doing that. You can't do that because that has you ignoring that this client has these feelings of hopelessness and loneliness, and we need to be doing what? We need to be assessing first. We assess before we do a safety plan, making A the best answer, and it has a flow to it. Conduct an assessment, establish a safety plan, and then do the directives. This is all that you are going to do in your initial phase of strategic therapy if there is also suicidal ideation that exists. Treat homicidal ideation questions the exact same way. A married couple in their 30s have been attending therapy for several months. Early sessions focus on identifying rigid interaction patterns and establishing directives to reduce reactive conflict. In the middle phase, you introduce structured communication tasks, reframing interventions. Now we are in the late phase of therapy, and the couple reports less frequent fights, but occasional arguments still seem to escalate quickly. They express a desire to maintain the progress and not fall back into old habits. As a strategic therapist, what would be the most appropriate intervention in the late phase of therapy with this couple? Now, we're not in the initial, we're not in the middle, we are in the late phase of therapy. So now we need to be looking for answer responses that has to do with the late phase of therapy. A says, prescribe the couple to schedule a weekly argument to bring hidden tensions into the open in a controlled way. We know that paradoxical interventions such as prescribing the symptoms, ordeals, symptom prescriptions, whatever the case may be, that's done in the middle phase, not the late phase. C says use a paradoxical intervention by instructing the couple to escalate their next argument as quickly as possible. First of all, I will say that is bonkers. That's crazy. They've already said that they have less arguments, so now we're going to bring them back? No, and this is late phase. That is a middle phase activity that you will do. D says reframe any remaining arguments as evidence that the couple still has unresolved. So now you're just assuming. And that's wrong. Reframe is an initial phase. We're in the late phase. If we take a look at B, we're going to do the follow-up directives. Reinforce, that's a nice term to look for when it comes to late phase goals, right? Reinforce new interaction patterns, and we're going to assign relapse prevention tasks to help solidify the change so that they know what it is that they need to do without that therapist. I don't care if this was a structural family therapy question. These are the kind of terms that you look for: reinforce, solidify, relapse prevention tasks so that they can do these things without the help of the therapist, making B the best answer. A couple brings their 12-year-old son to therapy because he has been stealing money in small items at home and from local stores. Good Lord. The parents reports feeling helpless. They constantly watch him, checking his belongings, arguing over how to discipline him, but the boy shows little remorse and he's amused by his parents' distress. He's laughing at their asses. You observe that the more the parents attempt to control the child, the more defiant he becomes. And he's just laughing too. As a strategic therapist, what is the most appropriate paradoxical intervention to use in the middle phase? Okay, now we're back to the middle phase of therapy. And we need a paradoxical intervention. So we need to be something that is clear, concise, and very specific in nature when we look for these answer responses. A says, tell the child he is no longer allowed to steal and instruct the parents to implement stricter surveillance and discipline. First of all, okay. He doesn't even listen to his parents, but he about to listen to the therapist. I mean, I get it. A strategic therapist is the expert. But come on now, Jahaley. We know that ain't going to work, right? B says, instruct the child to plan exactly when and what he will steal next week and report it in the next session. Okay, I like how that sounds, but let's look at the rest. Assign the parents to have a calm conversation with the child about trust. Yeah, and he's going to be laughing at him. He's already finding it amused. That ain't going to work. And we need a paradoxical intervention. That's not a paradoxical intervention. So D says, reframe the stealing as an attempt to gain independence. It would be nice if they were asking this in a initial phase question, but this is a middle phase question, and we need to be looking at a middle phase answer, and we also need to be looking for that paradoxical intervention, which is going to be B, prescribing a symptom. We are going to have him plan exactly when and what he is going to steal and then report it in the next session, right? B is your best answer. A strategic family therapist would view a family's presenting problem as what? A symptom of underlying intrapsychic conflict with one another, a learned behavior reinforced through faulty communication, a sign of dysfunction within the family's interaction patterns, or a result of poor emotional differentiation amongst each other. Now, here's the thing. When we look at these questions, we need to be thinking strategically. There are some terms in each of these answer responses that we automatically can just get rid of that has nothing to do with strategic therapy. Take a look at A, intrapsychic conflict, get rid of it. I think that's like your psychoanalytic or psychodynamic, whichever one of those. Has nothing to do with strategic, get rid of it. A learned behavior reinforced through faulty communication. Now, here's the thing. I think this sounds more like CBT. It's one of those behavior models. It ain't strategic, I'm telling you that much, right? This whole social learning theory and everything, that has nothing to do with strategic therapy. A says a result of poor emotional differentiation. We know automatically that's Bowen. Strike it out, get rid of it. Leaving C the best answer. A sign of dysfunction within family interaction patterns. Remember what I said. When we look for strategic therapy answer responses, we need to be looking for what? More the same. Patterns, interactions, stuck, dysfunction, behavior patterns that the family seems to be stuck in, faulty organization system, right? But those are your answer responses and phrases and terms that you need to be looking for when it comes to strategic therapy. From a systems perspective, because we know that strategic therapy draws from what? Systems theory, right? From a systems perspective, a family is best understood how? Is it a collection of independent individuals who influence one another, an interdependent unit governed by patterns, feedback, and rules, a group of people who share values, determine individual behaviors, or the sum of each member's personal experiences and histories? Now, here's the thing. A systems perspective, we need to be thinking how. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it's everybody. It includes everybody. It includes patterns. It includes feedbacks. It includes those rules. First order, second order change, things of that, morphogenesis, morphostasis, things of that nature. Those are like the answer responses that we need to be looking for when it comes to a systems perspective. A says a collection of independent individuals who influences one another. Now, call me wrong, but it sounds more like the circular causality of one of those, right? It doesn't have anything to do with a system's perspective. A group of people who shared values determines individual behavior. Sorry, Godzilla just walked past. Values to determine individual behavior. No, absolutely not. That's not right. The sum of each member's personal experiences. No. But if you take a look at B, it is an interdependent unit governed by patterns, feedback, and rules. That is the whole is greater than the sum of its part. It's interdependent. It's within one another, and is governed by how each and every one of them communicate with each other, how they interact with each other, and the behaviors that they have with each other, which influences the feedback and the rules that is going to do what? Trigger or alter change within that family system. When a strategic therapist observes that a child's tantrums stop parental conflict, the therapist can conclude what? Now, we need to be looking at how when that child has a tantrum, this mom and dad is going to start arguing and they're going to focus on that child's tantrum. That is how we need to be looking at this question. Is that child oppositional? I don't know, could be. The behavior has become functional within the system. Okay. The parents have reinforced bad habits. I mean, sometimes that can be true, right? I work with parents a lot that do that with their kids, right? But that's neither here nor there, okay? The child needs behavior intervention. Well, yeah, he needs behavior intervention, and so do the parents, right? But that behavior has become functional within the system because I'm pretty sure that child is tired of listening to mommy and daddy argue. So he knows that if he throws a tantrum, they're going to stop arguing and they're going to now become a unit and work together and focus on that child, which is what that child has been wanting. And that's why his tantrums is serving a function within the system. I hope that makes sense. In systems theory, the term circular causality refers to the idea that what? Now we're thinking systemic because we know that strategic therapy draws from general systems theory. Is it that behavior is determined by a chain of past events? Is each person's actions both influenced and are influenced by each other? Or are family functions best when communication is direct and rational? Or problems arise from a lack of insight into unconscious motives? Now, here it is again. When we talk about systems theory, we don't need to be looking at anything about unconscious, subconscious, the conscious, whatever the case may be. When we think about circular causality, we have to be thinking about A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E. That's how we need to be looking at it, right? Each person's actions both influences and are influenced by others. A influences B, B influences C, B influences D, and then we're right on back around again. That's circular causality. If we were talking about linear, A influences B, ping pong effect, like back and forth, linear. Causality, we're going to think about that circle that it's going to be put in, okay? In the early phase of treatment, a strategic therapist observes that the parents argue whenever the therapist directs a question to the child. The therapist would most likely do what? Now, let's take a look at this question. The therapist observes that the parents start to argue whenever the therapist asks a child a question. Why are the parents becoming so upset? Because the therapist is talking to the kid, right? Focus on stabilizing the parental's marital issues. Note that this pattern is a possible way that the system protects the child. Assign the child an ordeal to stop the argument or explore each parent's family history of conflict. Now, the therapist will most likely do what? This is one of your hypotheses or like conceptualizing, question, right? Focus on stabilizing the parents' marital issues. We're not talking about that because the focus is going to be on the kid. If I'm asking this kid a question, why do the parents keep interrupting? It's the kid we're talking about, right? Assign the child an ordeal to stop the arguments. How? That doesn't make any sense, right? D says explore each parent's history of conflict. We know that a strategic therapist doesn't dabble in the past, so we get rid of it. But we also need to take note that this pattern, which is a term that we need to be looking for, because every time that I ask this kid a question, the parents constantly interrupts. This is a possible way that the system is protecting this child. But then again, if we wanted to dive deeper, what are they protecting this child from? That every time the therapist asks this child a question, the parents argue to draw the attention from that child and back on them again. Right? they're not going to most likely try to stabilize, because we can't say like, oh, they have these marital issues. It's not the issues with the marriage. We have something going on with how they are trying to protect this child. That is what this question is asking you. It's not asking you about the parents. It's about the child and the pattern that they are continuing to do in order to protect the child. In the early phase of therapy, a strategic therapist question is designed to do what? Identify dysfunction, expose irrational thoughts and beliefs, elicit sequences of interactions that sustain the problem, or build insight into unconscious motivations. Now, here we are again with these questions that is strategic therapy, but yet we're seeing some answer responses in here that is like way left field. B and D. B is what? CBT. D is what? We're looking at those psychodynamic, psychoanalytical. You get rid of it. That leaves us with 2. Right? But in the early phase of therapy, the questioning is designed to do what? Identify dysfunction is a little bit too broad, and we need something more specific. Elicit sequences of interactions that sustain the problem, because again, we are focusing on what? The patterns, the problem that is continuing to keep happening, because we are stuck in these same solutions that we keep doing and nothing is working. C is much more specific than A, making C your best answer response. A family reports that their teenage son refuses to get out of bed for school. The therapist tells the parents, tomorrow morning, don't try to wake him up. Let him sleep as long as he wants to, but record how long it takes before you start worrying. Now, this is an example of what? Tomorrow morning, don't try to wake him up. Let him sleep as long as he wants to, but record how long it takes before you start worrying. Is that a reframe? Nope. We haven't turned anything negative into a positive, so it's wrong. Is that an ordeal? No. We're not giving them one thing that is less desirable, more desirable, so no. Boundary setting, that is an absolute no, because we're thinking strategic therapy, and boundary setting doesn't really go with this. But it is a paradoxical directive. It is a directive that is being given to this family in order to help them try to break that pattern that keeps occurring, making C the best answer. A strategic therapist tells a client who frequently complains of feeling overwhelmed to set aside 10 minutes each day just to worry as hard as you can. This is an example of what? Now, we are looking for something that is very specific in nature. We know it's not a reframe. We know it's not an ordeal or a metaphoric task. We know it's prescribing a symptom. This is one of your easy questions. We've beat this into the ground with prescribing a symptom. Each of us should automatically know when we see prescribing a symptom in a question, you should just hear me saying it's prescribing a symptom. Look for something that is specific in nature, and do not always look for something that is very broad or vague when it comes to strategic therapy. A couple is stuck in a pattern of mutual blaming. The therapist instructs each partner to write down one complaint of the day and read it aloud using a silly voice before bed. The purpose of this directive is to do what? Build empathy through humor, create an ordeal to extinguish the behavior, decrease the seriousness of the conflict by changing the pattern to something that's silly, or reframe the problem as being shared. Now, here is the thing. They are instructing them, they're going to write down a complaint of the day and they're going to read it out loud, silly, before they go to bed. Building empathy through humor, strategic therapists don't do that. We've already discussed that. They don't care about emotions. Creating an ordeal to extinguish the behavior. That's not what the question is asking you. That's not what an ordeal is going to be. That's not even what an ordeal is going to be used for, right? C says decrease the seriousness of the conflict by, once you decrease the seriousness of a conflict, you're going to be able to change the patterns that you are in. C is going to be the best answer. We know it's not a reframe, so we're going to automatically get rid of D. But C is going to be your best answer. Decrease the seriousness of the conflict by making it, more silly or whatever. It kind of like, it takes some of the pressure off of it so that they are more likely to change the patterns of the behavior all on their own. All right, this is the last one, everyone. A therapist tells a family that since the daughter refuses to do the chores, they should now assign her the role of the household observer, who take notes on how everyone else completes their task. This directive serves to do what? Punish the daughter, join with the family resistance, reframe the symptom and shift the interaction patterns, or encourage insight into family roles. If we go back and look, she's the one that's refusing. So she's not going to take on a role, and she's going to take notes of what everyone else is doing that she's not doing, right? This directive does what? It's not to punish. Joining with the family resistance is not what a strategic therapist is going to be doing. Encourage insight into the family roles is not what a strategic therapist does. Leaving C the best answer. We're going to reframe that symptom, right? The symptom is serving a function. There's a reason as to why she's refusing to do the chores. But now we're going to reframe that symptom and we're going to shift it to a more, it's going to be more, I guess, more healthier way to look at the interaction pattern that she's in. So now you're going to be observing and take notes on how everybody else complete the tasks. Hopefully, maybe she'll get tired of doing the observing and taking the notes. She'll give it up and she'll just start joining in doing the chores all on her own. I hope that makes sense. Alrighty, everyone, that wraps up the Kahoot mock exam of tonight. If anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, please leave me a message, comment, text me if you have my number. And of course, I will always respond to you. I will reach back out to you. Alrighty, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening.